The legislation for JobKeeper has passed Parliament and will become law. So what is this $1,500 a fortnightly thing, and what do we know now, and what are the next steps? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Alan Leung. I'm a chartered accountant and a fee nerd. Welcome to our channel. If you are new to our channel, we bring you practical tax and finance tips while keeping the taxman away, so please subscribe. The framework legislation about JobKeeper payment regime has passed Parliament on the 8th of April, so it is becoming law. The rules governing the payment and the benefits have also been published. So the first lot of JobKeeper payment, which is for the month of April, is scheduled to be made during the first week of May, and businesses are required to formally apply by the 26th of April 2020. There has been a lot of coverage about the background of JobKeeper, so we won't cover them again here, but instead, let's talk about the finer points of the key rules as we now know it. First, about the employers. Now, for most of our clients whose turnover is less than $1 billion, even when you take into account of their related businesses, they would be entitled to JobKeeper for a fortnight if their turnover for the month or the quarter of that fortnight has decreased by at least 30%. So what does it mean by turnover? Well, it is generally your GST turnover with some modification. And the way you apply the test is to use your projected turnover for the period, which could be a month or quarter, compare with the actual turnover for the same period last year. Now, one of the key modifications is the exclusion of what we call input tax supplies, and the typical examples will include residential rent, financial supplies, and certain type of investments. So landlords and investment companies would largely not qualify for JobKeeper. The next question is based on cash or is it based on billing? Well, it is neither, but rather based on the output or the supplies that the entity has made for that month or the quarter, and it appears not impacted by whether you are a monthly, quarterly, or annual lodger. So effectively, you are looking at your supplies that you've made in a period compared to a year ago. Next, how do you measure the 30% decline in the turnover? Well, let's look at a very simple example. Say I'm applying this test today for this fortnight and using a monthly period. So what I do is I look at the projected GST turnover for the month of April compared with the actual GST turnover for April last year, 2019. If the projected turnover in April 2020 is at least 30% less than last year's figure, then I have passed the test and I'm entitled to the JobKeeper for this fortnight. A common question is, what happens if I have a business whose income vary greatly from month to month, or it is a startup that didn't have a comparative turnover last year, or it has some kind of special circumstances, say unusual downturn last year because of the drought or bushfire. Now, in such case, you would have to apply for discretion from the Commissioner. By the way, this decline in turnover test is not a once-only test. It must continue to be applied at every fortnightly payment that you are looking at claiming. It is therefore possible for an employer to be eligible for one fortnightly period, but not another. Now let's talk about the employee. Well, we know that to qualify for JobKeeper, the employee must be a full-time or part-time employee employed by the business as of 1 March 2020, have over the age of 16, and has some kind of Australian residency. Now, casual employees are also eligible if they have been working with the business for a regular or systematic basis for the past 12 months. However, employees who are receiving parental leave payments or debt and partner pay, or is totally incapacitated for work while receiving workers' compensation payments are not eligible. Now that's because they are already receiving an income stream which should not be affected by COVID-19. Likewise, temporary residents like those on a 457 visa or TSS visa are also not eligible. Now about the payment. So what does it mean to the employer for the flat $1,500 per fortnightly subsidy? Well, there is a baseline assumption that to entitle the JobKeeper, the employer must have already paid the salary and wage to the employee of at least $1,500 in that fortnight. Now the idea is that the ATO then makes the JobKeeper payment to the employer shortly after the end of the calendar month for the fortnights ending in that month, like a reimbursement. If the employee ordinarily earns more than $1,500 per fortnight, then the JobKeeper payment will simply be like a subsidy of the employee's wage paid to the employer for $1,500 a fortnight. If the employee is earning less than $1,500, then the employee will now be paid $1,500 per fortnight, effectively getting a pay rise. Now the $1,500 must have already been paid for the fortnight to the employee. Importantly, this $1,500 a fortnight can take form of a salary, a wage, a commission, a bonus or allowance, and so on. So it can form part of the pay-as-you-go withheld amount, the super payment, or even under a salary sacrifice arrangement. So there is a bit of flexibility and opportunities. Oh, speaking about super, it can be tricky too. Now, for example, say you have an employee that ordinarily paid $2,000 a fortnight. The employer would simply continue to pay super on that $2,000 and simply get back the $1,500 reimbursement or subsidy from the government via JobKeeper. In other words, the entire $2,000 is subject to super. However, say you have a worker that is paid $1,000 a fortnight and now she gets $1,500, your super obligation is still only on the $1,000 as it has previously been, and the $500 top-up is not subject to super. Now let's just say you have a worker that has been stood down as your business is closed temporarily. The $1,500 JobKeeper subsidy will represent the entire top-up, and you're not required to pay super on anything. But remember though, JobKeeper is income to the employee and is subject to pay-as-you-go withholding regardless of how you account for super. You need to take tax out before you pay the employee. Oh, by the way, what happens if you're on a monthly pay cycle? It's okay, you still apply the 30% turnover reduction test on a fortnightly basis, but you can allocate the 2 fortnightly payments to the employee during the 4-week period. Oh, and one last question you commonly get. Now, can an employee get JobKeeper payment from 2 sources? The answer is no. Okay, let's turn to those businesses that have no employees. Now, they may be a sole trader, a company or partnership or trust. In such case, the business will still have to meet the 30% turnover reduction requirement to qualify. But what they do is to nominate one individual who is actively engaged in the business to be the recipient of the JobKeeper subsidy. Now, for a sole trader, obviously the sole trader himself or herself will be the nominated person. For the partnership, the individual has to be one of the partners. For a trust, the individual would be an adult beneficiary of the trust. Now, for a company, the individual would either be a shareholder or the director of the company. Now, just like the employee situation, there is residency, age, and nomination requirements for the individual. The business would have the power to nominate the appropriate person, so subject to all the nomination requirements that we discussed earlier, the person's other income would need to be considered as well. Oh, and other common questions. Can a nominated individual also get JobKeeper from his or her employer? No, the answer is no. With the legislation and rules now released by the government, we now know a lot more about JobKeeper. But there are still a lot of practical questions, like how do you apply? Is JobKeeper subject to payroll tax? How does JobKeeper affect workers' compensation premium calculation? What if I get the projected turnover wrong, and what is the ATO's tolerance? What if I had paid the wages to the employee, which is a precondition, but subsequently can't get back the JobKeeper subsidy or having to repay the subsidy because I got my projected turnover wrong? What is meant by active involvement in the business? Will my JobKeeper payment subsidy increase my turnover and affect some other aspect of tax, like eligible as a small business? For a company that has got no employees, that normally the individual's shareholder suddenly become an employee, and how would they interact with pay-as-you-go withholding, insurance and workers' compensation, and so on. The good news is that the Treasury and ATO are now developing further guidelines on how JobKeeper will work, and I hope that we will find out those answers to these questions very, very soon. If you like what we have just covered, please like our video below and subscribe to our channel so that you won't miss the update when they come out. And also, please leave us your comment on how COVID-19 has been impacting your life, your income, and your business. In the meantime, stay well, stay safe, and see you at the next video.